And we are back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, of course, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network, here at Go Local Live Center at 90 Waybossa Street. As we always say in the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the mean streets of La Prave, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. Tonight we will tell you a few of them. Joining me, old friend David Norton, here in studio, because we're going to have an informal conversation, going to sound off some ideas. But tonight, I consider today, in my mind, and I've done some ruminating and fulminating over the last few months, I've had some guests on the show, which I believe have contributed heavily to the argument and the discussions that we are going to advance. But today begins, I believe, the formal kickoff to our anti-stadium effort. As I mentioned in the run-up to the show, we had 2 years ago, it was a $120 million ask. A group of activist citizens got together from a variety of political, ethnic, social, economic backgrounds, different cities, different towns, different interests. We sublimated all of them to one cause, which was to make sure that crony capitalists did not literally reach into the pocket of everyday working Rhode Islanders and those folks who are financially challenged, right, and say, your money is ours. We believe that your personal wealth, your whatever existence you have, should be subsumed to our, what I call, my words, their wet Fenway dream. That we need, as a citizenry, to support their private enterprise. And we said, hell no. And I think one reflection of the success is that 2 years ago it was $120 million. Now we're down to below 40. So as someone who is an activist, a leader out front of this, how does it feel to have cost Larry Lucchino and his crew about $80 million?
It feels fantastic. I enjoyed every single minute of it, and now that it's rearing its ugly head up again, I'm ready to work with you and work with the people that were involved 2 years ago, and kick some butt again.
We're not tired at all, are we?
Nope.
Well, in the words of the immortal Dick Nixon, we are tan, rested, and ready.
Absolutely. This is what we live for, right? So, I mean, these guys come out with this proposal after they did this Providence deal, and they failed so horribly and so miserably. They come out with this new proposal, and the mayor of Pawtucket's running around doing all these interviews talking about how desperate Pawtucket is to keep the Paw Sox, and using the same strategy of threatening to leave Pawtucket for other cities. And then you have this budget fiasco, right? That happens. And at the same time, you have the mayor saying he wants to extend the session a couple of weeks in a very desperate fashion. And then you have the governor chime in and say that she doesn't want the Rhode Island taxpayer to be put on the hook for all of this. Pawtucket's got to take some responsibility. Then you have the mayor change the legislation. And then you have Senator Bill Connolly, who is the Senate Finance Committee chair now. He promises to come back in the fall to bring the Senate Finance Committee back in the fall to different locations in Rhode Island, different cities, and have a public vetting.
Now let's let's harken back to those distant days of 2015, when another tawdry group of misanthropes traversed the fields, the streets, the city streets, the fruited plain, if you will, of Rhode Island. And what started out as another exercise in civic discourse disintegrated into one holy hell of a mess, which actually at one point led to police escorting concerned citizens out of a public library because they dared ask questions without submitting them to the Lord God Masters of the Pawtucket Red Sox. Are we ready for yet another one of these public, and I'll use the coalition air quotes, listening tours? How is that going to work, David?
Well, it's going to work the same way it worked the last time, I believe. Fine citizens of Rhode Island and taxpayers are going to show up and they're going to give the Senate Finance Committee a piece of their mind, and they're doubly upset now because this is the second time they're attempting this thing. And the thing that I'm hearing from Pawtucket residents, not only in Rhode Island, not only Rhode Island taxpayers and Pawtucket taxpayers, but Pawtucket taxpayers are upset about this. They're more upset than they were originally that they would try to pull this again. So I think what they're going to encounter is a really angry mob scene. You know, but the people that showed up at these listening tours, the citizens that just showed up of their own accord,
Right.
to complain about this and oppose this, are very polite, of course, and considerate, but they're angry. And they speak in stern voices, and, you know, they threaten to vote people out, and so on and so forth.
As is their right. I mean, when folks like you or I get out in front of some of these folks, and we're accused of being negative, that we don't want to see anything built. And it's just amazing. That seems to be the game plan all the time. Again, I'm fortunate enough that once every month or so, Jim Hummel is kind enough to invite me on his show. And about a month or so ago, I got to spend quality time for the first time with the gentleman I refer to as the Eddie Haskell of Rhode Island politics. And of course, I'm talking about Billy Lynch. Right out of the playbook. You're so negative, you're so down on Rhode Island that you don't want anything to happen. Today, flash forward a month, different political party, different character, Joe Trillo. You're negative. You don't want anything built. Dan York, who I consider a friend, who I respect, introduces me when I call into his show yesterday. Here's the guy who would be happy to see the Pawtucket Red Sox run out of town. Balderdash.
Right. They're calling us naysayers. That's
Right.
that's what they're saying now. That's the key word.
Right.
That's their buzzword.
That their attempt to marginalize,
Yep.
not us personally, but what we represent.
Yep.
They somehow believe it's appropriate to diminish our concerns as being hopelessly confused with 38, well, as we like to say, hashtag 38 Stadium. That somehow that we're ill-informed and we're not sophisticated enough.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Have you read the legislation? That's a lot of what I hear. Have you read the legislation? Yes, I've read it, 5 times now, and there are different takes on this legislation and
Right.
different takes on this plan. Everybody approaches it from a different perspective, and the perspective that I like to approach it from is one that you're familiar with. No. We don't want it. We never did want it. We still don't want it. Just no. And I think a lot of the people that say we're naysayers, they also say, well, did you look at it? Have you considered it? We don't want to consider it. We don't want it. Period.
Pretty simple.
Yep.
Now, if the Pawtucket Red Sox built their own stadium,
Fine.
knock yourself out.
Knock yourself out.
It's America.
Yep. I don't think it's in a very good location. I think revitalizing the downtown in Pawtucket may not even be a good idea. It's not a natural city center.
Mhm.
And why that is, I'm not really sure, but it has something to do with 95, Route 95 being built and bypassing the city center. So it's not the stadium is not supported by the market.
Right.
So that's why they need a subsidy.
Right.
And the location really makes it much worse for me because I drove here from Pawtucket and I went right by the Apex location.
Mhm.
And I had to slow down to about 30 miles an hour, right? Because you have that one exit there on George Street that slows everything down considerably
To a
right
point.
after the S-curves, right? And you can't really see much going through the S-curves. That's why it's such a dangerous place on 95. If you have traffic back up from that location, which you will, I believe, with the stadium, and also the distraction. It might be a beautiful stadium, but you can see it right from the highway, right from 95. So I don't think that location is viable.
And let's talk about downtown development. these stadiums are insular in nature. I mean, the whole reason for its existence is to generate additional revenue per visitor.
Yes.
You take a visitor who traditionally might have spent $20 or $30, a couple of tickets, a couple of hot dogs, a couple of beers or Cokes, maybe a popcorn, maybe a souvenir, maybe $50, and you're trying to generate an additional stream of revenue for them, that's America, that's capital, that's business, that's fine.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
So, but if you choose to do that, shouldn't they be using their own risk capital?
Absolutely. They should. That's the whole point. I would love to build a recreation center, a hospital, a school, or something of that nature on the Apex location, something that's needed. It's still a shot in the dark because this is not something that is supported by the marketplace, right? But I'm in favor of our tax dollars going to things that provide a social benefit, especially in Pawtucket, because Pawtucket is a very poor community, very, very poor. Pawtucket is one of, I believe, 8 communities that receive state aid in the form of the Distressed Communities Relief Fund, and we receive about $1 million every year. There's Central Falls, there's Woonsocket, there's Providence, Cranston, Warwick, West Warwick. They also receive these funds from the state. And one of the things that they're trying to do, that Mayor Grebian is trying to do, is put up this state aid as collateral for the $15 million that he wants the city of Pawtucket to contribute to the stadium.
And let's think about that for a second. You're taking, it's just wrong on so many levels. You're taking the largesse of the taxpayers of the state of Rhode Island to ameliorate, if you will, a difficult situation. One that the state recognizes has to be dealt with. And you're putting that at risk for a private enterprise.
Yes.
That's disturbing.
It's disgusting and it's wrong, and this is one of the reasons that I'm so upset about what specifically the mayor is doing to put up this state aid as collateral, because the only way you qualify for this state aid is that the way they determine it is by the average resident's income level and also the amount of property tax that they pay. So it's only for poor communities like Pawtucket. And to think that our elected leaders would put this critical money, this scarce money coming from the state, up as collateral to borrow money for billionaires is just completely outrageous. And I think it's more complicated. I try to simplify it by saying collateral. What they're doing is they're calling it a backstop.
Right. Where do they, by the way, where do things like hunker down, backstop, transparent, how do these words arise from the common discourse and end up being such as I say, a revolting development? I mean, I used to like the word ancillary development. Backstop to me is a good word, or it used to be. Now George Carlin, God rest his soul, would have a field day on this. A backstop? You mean a bailout. That's terrifying that folks our alleged leaders, would spend that much time trying to focus our attention on false promises as represented by this idea, because they are so desperate, in Gina's case, to fulfill her, blood-like homage to, to the construction unions. Mayor Grebian, desperate not to be the one who lost the Paw Sox, is desperate for some type of legacy, I guess. They're willing to literally mortgage the future of the city of Pawtucket by rolling it on the dice.
Absolutely, and this is 30 years we're talking about. This isn't just like, oh, well, the state aid will be risked just next year or the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. 30 years. My daughter will be 40 years old. And you know where she'll live? It probably won't be in Pawtucket,
Right.
because this plan is reckless and destructive, and it just simply cannot happen.
Right. False promises made by false idols by raising false expectations. So you look, and you have to again wonder what the motivation is. Now, with Gina Armando, as I've said on this airways many times, my comments, not my guess. Clearly, you're talking about an individual who has no soul. Go back to the medical cannabis tax that she proposed. Last week, we had guests on to discuss her approval, her signatory authority on legislation that opened up the state's prescription medical database to warrantless searches by the police by an out-of-control former Pawtuckian. What is the word for a resident of Pawtucket?
Well, I'm not sure. Pawtucket.
Pawtucket. Of course, the esteemed legal legend, Attorney General Kilmartin.
Mm-hmm.
So we get that. We understand that there's a certain amount of false idol celebrity worship out here. Larry Lucchino walks in the room and the room lights up because he's Larry Lucchino. What else? I mean, I've attempted to poll individual representative senators in this, and they are scared poopless to go on the record.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I think Kilmartin came out today, right, with a piece in, is it Providence Business Network, PBN?
Yeah, Providence Business News, yeah.
Providence Business News, cheerleading for this proposal. And I saw it on Twitter, and I said, here's the guy that is responsible for covering up 38 Studios information,
Right.
Plugging the Paw Sox.
Right. The next scandal, who was a former minority leader from East Greenwich, who joined the early days of 38 Studios, predicted that this would in fact be the next scandal for the state of Rhode Island. And, oh boy, was he right. We know better now, and that's probably the single biggest difference in the electorate. Back in 38 Studios time, myself, I was, literally within 10 or 15 minutes of it being announced on the airwaves, I still remember, of Helen Glover's show of WHJJ fame, 9:20 a.m., which used to be a force in the media here in the state. From the chief, if you will, chief honcho of the then Economic Development Corporation, I'm talking about the legendary Keith Stokes, who somehow parlayed a position running business hours for the Newport Chamber of Commerce into running essentially a state-sanctioned investment banking firm. The principal difference between the state-sanctioned investment banking firm, otherwise known as Rhode Island Economic Development Corp., now known as a Commerce Corporation, and say a regular investment banking firm, the big difference being that the regular investment banking firms actually know what they're doing and actually make money. Whereas Keith Stokes doubled down on failure and generated historical losses for this failed enterprise we now call the Commerce Corp. Now, you didn't have social media in its form now. You didn't have it. Those were the earliest days, if you will, of social media. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just beginning to be used, if you will, as a force for political networking. In 2015, the variety of organizations, your group, the group that I was involved in, the folks from Frog and Toad, the folks on the east side, Sharon's group, all of those folks, like so many other community groups across the nation, discovered social media and used it in its earliest forms to crystallize public opinion, to disseminate the word, and also, and this is the most important part, to educate. People aren't fooled anymore, are they?
Nope, and we're still going strong. I mean, so we froze it in time, I guess. So I've got this page called, or it was called, Keep the Paw Sox in Pawtucket.
Right, tell us about the page and how folks can find it and join.
Yep, so Keep the Paw Sox in Pawtucket is the page that helped with the effort of keeping the Paw Sox in Pawtucket, but also keeping them out of Providence and not
Right.
spending the taxpayer money. So what we've done recently, after we won the fight in 2015, right, it was called Keep the Paw Sox in Pawtucket. That page basically froze, but all of the members stayed on that page.
Right.
And when this new proposal came up, I changed the name of the page to Keep the Paw Sox at McCoy and no tax money for the billionaire owners,
Right.
which is kind of comical, and it's, it's got
And, but,
a
and,
nice
and
rhetorical
folks,
sound.
you don't have to write that down because I will make sure that you're aware of the page and how to join it and how to follow it and how to like it and just, because it continues to provide a highly valuable public service it allows people to come together in community, discuss, ask questions, and provide a focal point, as does the Citizen Raise and the Fight the Stadium page, and come together and find out information, different takes, converse with other folks in the state, and just achieve what we pointed out, I think very effectively in the first hour, what the people in Burrillville have accomplished, and also what the people in Newport accomplished, and that is create a sense of community around these issues, so that people of goodwill, of a variety of economic, racial, I think a variety of backgrounds, economic, can come together and gain a fundamental understanding of the facts surrounding the situation, as opposed to the urban legends that folks, like Stephen Pryor and Gina Raimondo and the glitterati, if you will, of Rhode Island political leadership, as I like to say, like to perpetuate and perpetrate on an unwilling populace. Say that 3 times fast. Because if it wasn't for pages like yours, we would continue to be treated, and I use that term loosely, to the same type of crap that we were spoon-fed. Well, let's go down the list. We were told at the Ryan Center that the economic opportunities were endless. And you say, well, what's the common denominator between the Ryan Center and the Pawtucket Red Sox? Well, the same firm that's consulting to the Ryan Center and were predictors of their performance are the ones coming up with these rather hallucinatory numbers reflecting the Pawtucket Red Sox. What are the odds? Coincidence? I think not. Firms like that, they almost always seem to somehow, just magically, echo the claims that were originally postured by the movers and the shakers, weren't they?
Absolutely, it's Groundhog Day. I like to call it Groundhog Day.
Right.
The same situation continues to occur in the state of Rhode Island, and one of the reasons is we've got the Commerce Corporation. The root of all evil
Yes.
in Rhode Island is the Commerce Corporation. It used to be what? The Economic Development
Right.
Corporation. It's changed its name a couple of times, hasn't it?
So yeah, and listen, given the poor performance, the generational failure, and just the epic level of cronyism that takes place, of course they've changed names.
Mm-hmm.
Now, would you want to be known as the Rhode Island Economic Development Corporation after all those bond losses?
I would not.
I wonder. By the way, maybe this is a question for the gurus. Are we going to have to pay bond insurance again for these bonds, for the Pawtucket Redevelopment Authority, that we ultimately won't cash in when the thing fails? Just gotta throw that
That
out
is a
there.
good question. I believe so.
Right.
Yeah, and this Pawtucket Redevelopment Agency is very interesting how it was explained to me that what is one of the advantages of doing it this way by the owners of the Paw Sox is that if you go through the Pawtucket Redevelopment Agency, that is a signal to bond rating agencies that it's backed by the state, unofficially. The
Right.
state isn't saying it's backed by the state, but the bond rating agencies understand that. In fact, it is backed by the state. So they get a much lower interest rate on borrowing that amount of money. So that's one advantage. And then the other advantage is that you don't need a referendum because it's going through this agency.
Right.
In the state constitution, if the amount of money the state wants to borrow is over a certain amount, it has to be on the ballot.
Right.
And they keep bypassing this, right? They did it with the tolls.
Right.
Now they're doing it with the Paw Sox.
We had the moral authority bonds under 38 Special, 38 Studios, 38
Yep.
Stadium. And again, for those folks, this isn't 38 Studios, and you're naive. Every single style of relationship in place during 38 Studios is duplicated here.
Yep.
You know, yes, it's not they seem to obsess with the notion that because it's not the software industry, that it's not as risky. We're talking about an entertainment venture for a sport that is not at the major league level.
Oh.
In the year 2017, when there was ample competition for the hearts and minds and attention spans, however short they may be, of the youth.
And there's strong consensus among economists, and specifically sports economists, that subsidies for stadiums are not beneficial. They do not produce economically beneficial activity. They're not catalytic. And that's really difficult to get economists, it's like herding cats, to get economists to agree on everything. On anything. They're always arguing from different perspectives, and it's more of an art than a science sort of thing. But the consensus I've read is around 80%, which is extremely high for economists in general. But then you've got these specific sports economists. And a lot of our supporters, and we, are mini experts on this. And I think that people like Mayor Grebian and Senator Conley and the governor, they don't really understand that we have a pretty deep understanding of how this is going to work and what economists say about it. And, you know, I think it's unfortunate that they just dismiss us as naysayers and they ask us, well, have you read the legislation? Yes, we've read the legislation. We read it before in 2015. We studied it. There are people that I know that are part of the opposition that I consider experts on this issue. I mean, they've studied Camden Yards. They've studied almost every single stadium that was built, whether it's a football stadium, a baseball stadium, or what have you, across the country. And they've looked at the results. And I think it's really fantastic that we've educated ourselves on this issue. But I think it's equally blunderous for our elected officials to dismiss us as naysayers and ask us if we've actually read the legislation.
They would like to treat us as cranks, basically. Yet, and folks, if you haven't seen it, if you go to fightthestadium.com, you'll see the video. We've got most of it on video of the conversation I had with Dr. Matheson from the College of the Holy Cross. We've got, I can't say now, can't commit now, but there's potential next Friday for another superstar economist to appear via Skype on the show. And what was sad, as I sat on the Lively Experiment, and again, Jim Hubble does a fabulous job with that show. But I had Joe Trillo, again, talking about, he didn't use the ancillary development word, but talking about building up the downtown of Pawtucket by building a stadium, when in fact, it is not theory, it is established fact. In most situations, stadiums near neighborhoods that are blighted, I hate to use that word, but there's some blight in Pawtucket, right?
It sure is.
Something that we'd like to see go away. But stadiums that are near areas of blight actually hasten the blight. Because, again, whatever economic activity could take place in that area is redirected to the elephant in the room. And when I look at Cumberland, for example, and I pointed out to the Cumberland City Council, this may be news to you, I'm actively working with the Cumberland City Council to adopt a resolution opposing subsidies for the stadium. Because Cumberland will now be surrounded by the two largest state monopolies in entertainment in the state, and that of course is Twin River and potentially the new Pawtucket Red Sox Stadium. They will sit on either side of Cumberland and act as, in the words of the great Ross Perot, that giant sucking sound you listen to, will be, particularly in the first couple of years, when anything like this is a novelty and attracts outsized business in the first few years, they will suck the lifeblood out of another neighborhood that's impaired, and that's downtown Cumberland. There is a downtown area in Cumberland, and it is similarly challenged to CF and Pawtucket. Wonderful people work there, some great businesses. That's certainly not a shot at them. These folks accomplish what is incredibly difficult to do, which is not only succeed in business, but just sometimes stay open in business in Rhode Island. You know, if these folks are successful at CF and Pawtucket and Cumberland, it's almost despite the best efforts of the state.
Exactly.
And here's the sad part. Now, you know, you spend a lot of time in Pawtucket. I spend a lot of time in Cumberland and some in CF. There already is a nascent, I'll call it mini boom, happening in Pawtucket and CF, based on breweries and restaurants that are bringing a lot of people into the area, and that's organic economic growth, funded by risk capital by owners,
Yes.
and sweat equity by people working at these businesses.
It's supported by the market, right?
Right.
For the vast majority,
Right.
it's supported by the market.
There's a demand, and those people are filling
Yeah.
it.
And what the Commerce Corporation and the state of Rhode Island should do with that, I think, is advise and assist those successful businesses that are already there. You're talking about people that live in Rhode Island, their families work in the businesses, local people work in these businesses. When you talk about the Paw Sox, you're talking about out-of-state billionaires
Right.
who want to trap you in this concrete fortress and take all the money that you have. So the ancillary development that they're talking about is going to be non-existent. Why would they want people? Their objective is not for downtown Pawtucket to be revitalized and succeed. Their objective is to suck all of the money they can out of that area.
Right.
Whoever's going to come to that stadium, they want to trap them inside, sell $10 hot dogs, $20 glasses of wine, parking, take all the money you have right there from you. And that's what they want. And that's fair, but if they want to do that, I don't think we should give them any tax money at all.
Because here is, to me, is the brutal irony. We are actually asking people, families in many cases, who own businesses in Central Falls, in Pawtucket, and Cumberland, and Lincoln, and Providence, and actually across the state, but particularly those folks whose businesses are within the economic zone that this stadium will operate in. We are asking them to take a portion of the tax dollars that they earn through their own businesses, using their own sweat equity and their own risk capital, to actively subsidize their economic competition. That's a lot to ask from somebody, isn't it?
It sure is.
And you, through some of the events you did called Crash Pawtucket, and some of the, in your campaigning, you've met a lot of these business owners. You know them on a first-name basis.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And how much of a struggle is it? Just on pure, how many of these businesses survive sometimes by pure will?
Oh, the vast majority survive by pure will and hard work. And they're constantly telling me, well, when we talk about the Paw Sox owners and other situations like that, they're saying, why can't I get a tax break? Why don't I get any assistance? I started my business I purchased this pizzeria myself, and I built it up when it was nearly bankrupt from the previous owner and so on and so forth. So you've got people that have started with nothing. Many of them are immigrants also. I've got a lot of Egyptian friends for reasons that are unknown to me, but they love to get in the pizza business after they immigrate here, and they slave away at it for 16, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they just want some relief. They don't get tax breaks. They get higher taxes, and they get higher food costs, and they get more regulation from the state. And I'm not saying that I'm not in favor of regulation, but I think for small businesses, you don't have any assistance in the state of Rhode Island.
Years ago, I had the opportunity, it's been quite a few years, but I had the opportunity to work for a company that was based out of Salt Lake City, Utah, and I happened to visit their equivalent of the Commerce Corporation. And you can fact check me on this, but at the time, I don't believe they were involved in any loan support. They would give you advice on where to go for loans. They might give you advice on how to do a business plan or provide the documentation for loan, but they certainly weren't involved in underwriting loans, and they certainly did not have direct loans or bonds.
Well, there's a danger in that, right?
Well,
When there's money involved, you say, okay, I'm gonna give you access to $50,000, $100,000. You buy this small business franchise, and then I'm gonna set you up with vendors.
Right.
Well, who are the vendors?
Right.
It's your friend,
Right.
right? You're gonna share and divert some of this money, so then it becomes corrupted because there's so much money involved. And I saw that when I first came back from Japan at the Economic Development Corporation. I was part of a marketing company, and I was doing a kind of internship there. And we would go in and give a presentation on how to do internet marketing and print marketing to potential new business owners. And these guys were mostly retirees, right, that just wanted to fulfill their dream of starting a small business after they've retired and so on and so forth. And I looked at their business plans, and this was not so long ago, so I know a little bit about starting businesses from my own experience in the business I had in Japan. And I thought, wow, these are really terrible business plans, and this probably isn't going to work. But that wasn't what was important. What was important is that they get the loan, they get the money, and then they get connected with the vendors. And I thought that was a really terrible, terrible situation. So what I see the Commerce Corporation doing with small business development is bankrupting retirees for the most part. And I mean, there were other sorts of people there, but they all needed help, and I felt that they were not getting real help from the Commerce Corporation. They were getting money which was then going to be spent on these other vendors or people that would help accounting, marketing,
Right.
so on and so forth.
Well, the Utah folks focused, in terms of when it came to raising money, exclusively, there's something called blue sky regulations, which are the laws surrounding how you go out and what you have to do in terms of documentation, legal structure, in order to raise capital from outside. They provided legal assistance for that, which can be astonishingly expensive. They provided assistance with tax and corporate legal formation issues. All of that kind of analysis, which is worth thousands and thousands of dollars for the entrepreneur, which is critical to their successful formation, and was certainly expensive for the state of Utah to provide, but it accomplished two things. Folks had access to all sorts of tools in helping them start their businesses, while simultaneously the state of Utah not really being at risk other than the costs involved in maintaining professional staff. So it was truly a win-win. Folks walked away with the Utah example with access to skills and tools and the thing that was expensive and extremely important to their business. But at the same time, capitalization of the business was still left to the dreaded private sector without risk to the individual taxpayer. I go back to the 38 Studios example, and what I used to say, because, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, depending on the perspective of that individual media member, you might get a little time or a lot of time. And what I've always been appalled by, alleged conservatives rallied around state cronyism in the interest of jobs with 38 Studios. I clearly got less and less time. Remember, too, that the mainstream media has a vested financial interest in the success of organizations like Twin River and the Pawtucket Red Sox, merely through the incredible amount of advertising dollars, which, by the way, in the case of Twin River, is actually taxpayer financed. So, I don't doubt, and I'll say this publicly, sue me, he didn't say it, I'm saying it, that regardless of how effective Twin River advertising is in the Providence Journal, the Providence Journal will always receive a stream of revenue from advertising from Twin River. No one could be reading the paper. And just to be blunt, to keep the journal off their backs, they will spend many, many dollars in advertising. And that's true across the media platform. So you get smaller and smaller amounts of time if you're an activist like yourself or myself. So I had to condense my 38 Studio argument into something along this lines. No equity, no board seat, no personal guarantee, no future. I could usually get that out before they realized who it was on the air and shut down. And what I meant by that was the state of Rhode Island had no board seat. Is the state of Rhode Island going to get a board seat on the Pawtucket Red Sox? They had no equity. Now, I'm not even saying it's appropriate for the state to have equity in a private business, but they were offered none. Is the state going to get any equity in the Pawtucket Red Sox?
Nope. Nothing.
Personal guarantees. Is Larry Lucchino going to sign on the dotted line personally for this?
No. No, not even for, that brings up another issue with the Apex site. So first they've got to buy it, right? And if they take it by eminent domain, they're going to have to pay 150% of the fair market value. And what is that value? We don't know right now. I think they asked for an outrageous amount of money. The Apex owners did, but they were also.
I would if I were them.
Yeah, but they're also involved in lawsuits. Right? So you've got all of this controversy swirling around this location. And then you've got the environmental cleanup, which is going to be substantial. But they still don't know how much it's going to cost. So there's actually, we're going to have to, of course, there's going to be cost overruns. As soon as you sign on the dotted line, as soon as this deal is done, the projections for how much it's going to cost are going to rise.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's true. In case you haven't seen it before.
They wouldn't do that to us, would they?
Yeah, I think
that could be misleading people.
Well, but what I'm saying is that there are so many things wrong with this proposal. It's not only the finances and how that's going to work out, but you've got the physical location that's bad for traffic, as far as I'm concerned, and then you've got this environmental cleanup. And if you take it by eminent domain, you're going to have to pay 150% the fair market value for that location, and it's got to be beyond $2 million. So you're talking about an extra couple million right off the bat that you're going to have to pay. That's not accounted for in the amounts that are laid out in the proposal. So to me, it's just incredible that they're able to just say, okay, this is the amount of money, and then after the proposal is approved, they say, okay, we've changed the amount of money. It's going to cost more.
I got to ask you, and this isn't a rhetorical question, if there's a common denominator between the three major sets of, four actually, sets of activism that I discussed tonight, I guess I'm talking about 38 Studios, the Newport Casino, the Burrillville Energy Power, base power plant, and now the Pawtucket Red Sox Stadium. All four of these ideas were postured by people with sophisticated business backgrounds, supported by large governmental bodies, buttressed by, allegedly, by years of research, both market and legal. How is it that all four of these ideas, excuse my language, folks, how could all four of these ideas just suck so badly? Just on a level heretofore thought impossible. I mean, just, wow. I mean, you know, we all have philosophers in our day-to-day lives that we look to. People of religious, economic, moral stature. One of mine, of course, is Bugs Bunny. And as Bugs would say, what a bunch of maroons. You know, I know some of these issues that you're very familiar with. I know you obviously are right there, again, on the bleeding edge of 38 Stadium. I know that you've got more than a passing familiarity with it going on within energy. The other two issues you may or may not have been involved in. But is there anything redeeming at any level other than the personal benefit its inventors might receive? Is there anything out there of any level that's redeeming to any of these that you can find?
No. Nothing. Zero.
Uh,
It's unfortunate. You know, it really is unfortunate, but this is the world we live in. I think it's, you know, I'm a capitalist. I like capitalism, but I think it has extremes. So these out-of-state billionaires come in the Wasatch example, they buy up this team. Ben Mondor, now there was a good model. There was a good role model. Did a lot for the community, cared about the community, cared about the fans, cared about the city. But you have these owners come in, and their philosophy is all is fair in love and war and the pursuit of money.
right.
And that's basically, I think, the problem that we have in Rhode Island. We don't have investors or developers that really want to do something good. They just want the money. And they can see, and it's funny to call it a capitalist motivation, because what they're doing is they're taking state money, they're taking taxpayer money. So
Right.
they're not being good capitalists
No,
at all. They're
no.
not sticking to their own philosophy,
Well,
other than they're trying to get all the money that they can.
Right, personal gain. I mean, I had the opportunity, and I think I'll try and put it up on the fighttostadium.com page, to ask Kurt Schilling the immortal question. He appeared on WPRL on the John DePietro show last year. And it was really a groundbreaking interview. He was on the air for a couple hours. Finally, I guess, enough of the legal issues have been settled surrounding 38 studios that he was able to, he got the green light from the lawyers to show up. So I asked him, I got the opportunity to call him, and I asked him, you know, you purport to be a free market Republican. I forget my exact words. I'll load the audio, which we managed to get, because it was stunning. Not anything that I asked, but I asked him, how does that, you know, essentially, how does it work? You claim to be a small government Republican, and yet, you know, you fed it all this largesse from the company. And I'm not going to quote him because his words are actually better than mine. But you know, he said first of all, he said that was the first time anyone had asked him that, which I found astonishing. But one thing about Kurt Schilling, he is honest in that sense to a fault. He just spills guts. Said it was a great question, and pointed out, I think actually accurately, from his perspective, that he never considered that it was going to be a fail, that the business was going to fail, so it never occurred to him that this would be a problem, and that, you know, they came to him with his money, so his responsibility to his employees, to his other investors, was to take the money. And then he uttered the immortal words, which I have on audio: if I was governor, I never would have offered that deal. Think about that. If there is a cronyist bogeyman in Rhode Island history, now and forever, it will be number 38, Kurt Schilling. And in his own words, unedited, unmitigated, unfiltered, to the point, he readily suggests that if he was governor, he would never do a deal like that. Doesn't that put the lie to all of this?
It's insane. But if I come to you and I say, hey, would you like a risk-free investment? I'm going to give you 20%, 30%.
Yeah.
It's risk-free. You might take it. So I wonder if it's these evil, you know, super wealthy vulture capitalists coming in, stealing the tax money, or is it the people that we've elected, you know, holding out the tax money, saying, hey, would you like some of this? And we'll do something else for you. What else can you do for me if I give you access to these funds? And there's never any real direct connection until the FBI is involved, and then, you know,
right.
they catch it on tape.
And then Gordo ends up in, yeah.
Yeah,
Spending quality time.
yeah, eventually it happens every once in a while. But I wonder which is the more motivated party. Is it the super wealthy vulture capitalist trying to get at the money of the taxpayer, or is it the political leader holding out the tax money and saying, I can give you an interest-free loan if you give me something else?
Right. Now, as we sit in the studio on 98 Boston Street, directly catty corner to the Go Local Live studio is a building being rehabilitated by one Joseph Palino, right there.
Okay,
He got, whatever the acronym du jour is, he got a deal. Now, Joe Palino and the Palino family are very successful real estate investors. Is there anything to suggest, and I'm not besmirching his honor, I'm not questioning his honesty, I'm not questioning the legality of him, all of it was above board. Is there anything to suggest, however, that Mr. Palino wouldn't be successful if he was not offered that deal, to your point?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I believe it.
So, I mean, I think your point is appallingly on target. Do I sense like rats in a subway tunnel? Do some of these crony capitalists send out the signals? Do I think then that some craven, degenerate politicians, sensing personal gain in the long run for them, go out and masking it by doing the people's business, set themselves up for this? Absolutely. Because it's astonishing that despite all facts to the contrary, they still cling death-like to this, in this case, in the case of the Pawtucket Red Sox Stadium, to this completely disproven fallacy that this will promote growth downtown.
Hmm. Yeah, well, in the case of Larry Lucchino, he's done this before.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to think he's come to Rhode Island with a plan. He's done it before, he knows how to do it, he can pull the strings, so I kind of see the mayor of Pawtucket and other actors, maybe Bill Conley. They don't really understand exactly what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Larry's pulling the strings and they're being taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part. The governor, I'm not really sure that's the case. I think she's more of cognizant of what's going on and the money that's
She's very,
changing
very,
hands.
she's very, very intelligent. She comes from a sophisticated financial background. She knows exactly how the game is played because she's played it.
Yeah. But when you put the two of them together, then I think they're kind of equals, right? You got the vulture capitalist and then
Right.
you've got the elected official. Which one is more guilty of trying to take our money?
Right.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. How do we assign blame? So I kind of feel sorry for, figures like the mayor of Pawtucket because he's being played. Could be. Maybe he's aware of it. Maybe he isn't. But I'm sure that Larry Lucchino has a lot more experience pulling these types of deals off. He knows how to manipulate people and what strings to pull. But in the governor's case, I wonder, which actor we're going to assign more blame to,
Mm-hmm.
or are they equally bad?
Wow. Folks, if you're just tuning in right now, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage born free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network, here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center at 90 Way Boston Street. Of course, this is the city we love, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories, La Prave, Sin City, the Las Vegas of the Northeast, where one can find more ways to sin really than just about anywhere. Joining me in studio, of course, is David Norton, he of Pawtucket Red Sox fame, Keep the Paw Sox in Pawtucket fame, and true to his word, he, like me, ain't going away anytime soon until this is finally over with. At 8 o'clock, Corey Watkins, Libertarian Party candidate for governor of Texas, will be joining me via Skype. Let's talk about for this second. This is never really going to go away, is it?
I had this discussion with some other activists the other day, and I asked them, I proposed the same thing. I said, this is not going to go away. They're just going to keep coming back. So how is it that we can stop the Paw Sox owners once and for all?
Mm-hmm.
Because if this deal falls through, the next year they'll be coming to Cumberland, or they probably won't be coming to Cumberland, but maybe Central Falls, I'm not sure.
Well, let me ask you, what do you think they end up in? Well, in one of the lighter moments this week, it was disclosed that the mayor of the Reeve was going after the Paw Sox.
That was hilarious. I laughed
Nice
out
kid.
loud.
Fine family, I'm sure. Don't knock yourself out here. What I'd say to him if he was in the room right now is, don't hurt yourself. Is there a chance, as I like to say, and I probably said this a couple times tonight, because again, I think I'm pretty funny, but how did I put it on Lively this morning? When I'm on my way home for the Worcester Red Sox game, remind me to stop by and pick up my Hartford Patriot tickets. Okay? But seriously, do you think from your reading of the tea leaves, and it's hard to say because so much of this is close to the vest, is there any chance that they move to Worcester?
No, I don't think so at all. And as I mentioned before, Larry Lucchino knows what he's doing, right? This is his plan. This is his strategy to pit one city against another city. And it's succeeded before, but I think one of the things that's happening now is you and I have encouraged others to think differently.
Mm-hmm.
And now I see people making remarks on Facebook and other social media saying, all right, go ahead, get out, we don't want you. And these are people that actually do want the Paw Sox to stay where they are and, you know, continue playing ball. But I think in Rhode Island, we've been through this. We went through this in 2015, and we realized, okay, they're saying this thing about going to other cities, and other cities want them, and they're going to go there. But at the same time, we've educated ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that the Providence metro area is a very big area and very useful for the Paw Sox owners. It's very attractive. Worcester is the second biggest city, but it's not a bigger entity than we have here in the Providence metro area. And I think it's called Providence, New Bedford, Fall River
Right.
area. And Worcester is not the same size market. So the Paw Sox really don't have anywhere, Paw Sox owners do not have anywhere to put the team, and even if they did, they would have to rebrand, and they would really upset the fans in this market.
Mm-hmm.
So I do not see it happening at all. Hopefully what will happen is we'll elect a bunch of new people in the next election. The Paw Sox will end up staying at McCoy at least until 2020, and I hope that the owners will take a loss and sell the team to someone else who's willing to be more reasonable. So I think if the Paw Sox were willing to be reasonable about this, there are a lot of different ideas that have been floated by activists, and one of them was, well, maybe they stay at McCoy, and we give you a little bit of a subsidy over 5 years' time. We'll give you a couple million here, a couple million there, and we'll let you charge for parking, that sort of thing. I think that would be, I think that would work for a reasonable investor. But these guys are billionaires. The way they became billionaires is to be cutthroat about everything and suck all of the money out of everything that they possibly can. So they're not being reasonable.
They don't think they have to be.
No,
And they're used to
they
winning.
don't. Yep.
I mean, let's look at some of the people involved. Terry Murray, Fleet Bank, helped engineer the acquisition of Fleet by Bank of America Corporation. Phil Ryan made CVS a Fortune 10 corporation. This is not amateur hour, which makes it all the more startling that at this point in time, they wouldn't just take their own money, build their own damn stadium, and literally probably live happily ever after. Because it is my contention that if they did that, they could still resurrect their image here in the state, and that fans would flock to them. Because there would be a real sense of pride, as opposed to that sense you get when you got to the casino and you got ripped off. I believe that the Red Sox brand, if in fact they're even successful doing a stadium, is permanently soiled if they take that approach. Because every time anyone walks in, they will feel like they need to take a shower.
Yep.
And the reason they will feel that way is because all the people that we know who were involved in the fight will make them feel that way and won't let this die so easily. What's astonishing about this effort and the Newport effort and the Burrowville effort is that you've got folks who year after year after year are willing to continue to fight the same fight, who have a tremendous emotional, moral, and philosophical stake in it, and haven't gone away. I want to ask you about, because you live in Pawtucket and you're closer than I am, I've certainly spoken to this about a lot of people. You've really got three groups of fans, if you will, that go to a Paw Sox game. And I'm interested in what you think the percentage breakdown is. There's a group of people who have a real emotional attachment to McCoy Stadium. I'm talking about people who grew up in Pawtucket, East Providence, really grew up in the area, and for them, that's almost sacred ground. That's the first group. The second group is people who on a beautiful summer night just want to go watch baseball somewhere. And as long as the general level of talent of baseball is good, they'll go. Mm-hmm. The third level of people who are actually genuine Pawtucket Red Sox fans, the type of people who would follow the team anywhere, the type of people who are really brand loyal, who are in a sense really root for laundry. Mm-hmm. Right? What do you think, based on all the time you've invested in this? I'll let you go first, and I'll tell you what I think. But what do you think the breakdown is if you were to take those three distinct populations? And if there's another group out there, let me know, because you're so close to the situation. But what do you think? How does it all shake out?
Well, I think the group out of those three that you mentioned, I think the group, the largest group, is the group that wants to enjoy some sort of entertainment, mm-hmm. some sort of sports entertainment mm-hmm. on a nice evening, and right. probably with the family or with a bunch of friends. They're more of a casual,
right.
well, sure, I'll go to a Paw Sox game.
Is that, and a few weeks ago, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the interview, but again, I'll be putting that to the page soon too. There's a couple interviews up there already, but we're going to keep adding to it. I had the commissioner of the Futures Collegiate Baseball League on, who operates 9 franchises around New England, the biggest of which, ironically, is the Worcester Bravehearts, which, off the top of my head, I believe is getting 3,000 to 4,000 fans a game. High-level Division I college baseball players, local connection, modeled after the Cape League, but as opposed to the Cape League, where many of the games are essentially held at the equivalent of a high school field, are actually held in, I think, 8 out of 9 cases in legitimate stadiums. Is that fan base largely that goes simply because they want an evening out in the summer? Is that fan base, in your minds, being so close to it, largely transferable to any legitimate baseball team that came in there?
Yes. Or a soccer team. And it's unfortunate. I like baseball. Lots of people like baseball. But baseball is slow. Baseball is not football. Baseball is not soccer. Baseball is, I think, a sport on the decline, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And it's because it takes so long for the action to happen. It takes a special kind of person to appreciate baseball, right. sit through an entire game. So the people that are going there just for a night out, they're going to drink some beer, they're going to drink some wine, they're going to talk, and if there's a home run or something, then they get sort of the soccer feel. I think, like, this is my team and I want them to beat this other team. Mm-hmm. Whereas soccer is much more intense in that feeling. They have the shirts and the special dance.
You got the horns and the whole thing going on.
Yeah, you got the whole thing going on. So I think actually you could develop a pretty good brand for a soccer team in Pawtucket, because you've got Central Falls right over there. It's an immigrant community. Most of the people understand soccer and they love soccer. Like, all you have to do is drive down 146 on a Sunday morning, and as you get out right over the Providence line, you'll see community soccer teams playing there in front of a lot of people, particularly for 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Soccer is tribal for folks from Central, South America, actually for most of the world. And you're right, it appeals strongly to an immigrant population. So you feel that the majority of those. Now then you've got the other two groups of people. What was I saying? People who are hardcore Paw Sox fans.
How many of the hardcore Paw Sox fans do you lose if you simply go to another team? Do you think that's a significant number economically?
No. No.
There'd be an adjustment.
Yep.
There'd be some bitterness
Yep.
for a couple of weeks. And then they kind of sneak in, and all of a sudden, it's baseball, it's summertime, it's McCoy, it's Pawtucket, the hot dogs taste the same, the beer is the same. If they're really smart, the new team will keep the same colors. You know? It's still five, it's maybe even ticket prices go down. And
I think it's fine. What we need is someone who's good at managing sports teams and the marketing, sports marketing, and stuff like that. So the Paw Sox owners haven't really put much effort into managing the marketing and the public relations. My God, they have gone negative with the public relations. They're just upsetting people left and right.
it's pretty hard to piss people off around here. I mean, we're a pretty beat up bunch. You have to really grab us by the to even get us to notice at this point. We're so bruised. Yeah, it's kind of breathtaking to watch the anti-marketing, which brings up another great question. All right, and I really this is a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming in here tonight. Charity. In the latest offer du jour, the Pawtucket Red Sox, they're willing to offer money to charity. Is it really, this is not a rhetorical question, is it really charity if you're taking through the use of force, i.e. taxation, funds away from a citizen and then giving a small part back to that citizen? Is that charity at any level?
No, of course it's not. I mean, it's a ripoff. It's a ripoff. That's what it is. It's insulting, is what it is.
Right.
And it's sad that a lot of people don't realize that they're taking all of this money and then giving 1% or 0.5% back and saying, "Oh, look at the good that we're doing in the community."
Right.
It's really it's insulting to Pawtucket residents, I think. So this could be a negotiation tactic on the part of the mayor and the other players that want to keep them in Pawtucket. Why not say, well, we might lose you guys and we'll bring in a soccer team because we're an immigrant community, and the other communities surrounding us are already ready for soccer. Because most people outside, I say immigrant community because a lot of people outside the United States and the people living in Pawtucket as part of the immigrant community already love soccer. So you've got this love of a different sport that could be put inside the same stadium, and then you've got a cultural development that could happen in Pawtucket and Central Falls. And instead of having the sole tradition be Little League baseball teams, you could develop soccer teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then this would in turn develop the United States soccer infrastructure so that we could be better players in the world. And we're not ranked very well right now.
Soccer would be lights out in Pawtucket, wouldn't it? It would just be, if you had any sort of professional level team come in, it would just.
I think it would, and the intensity of the fans would be better. And you can do a reboot of the stadium and the prices and the parking and all of that stuff, as long as you're reasonable about it. I think the Paw Sox owners got caught with this, this really nice guy, Ben Mondor, who owned this baseball team and built it up. And it built up the brand, kept the parking free, kept the prices low, and they came in and they're struggling for a way. Well, how can we raise the prices? Well, why don't you just charge for parking and call it a day? That's that would be one of my solutions, as long as it's supported by the market and people were willing to pay $10 to park.
We only got a couple of minutes left, but a friend of mine that I haven't seen in too long a time, I worked with him in the past, was a guy named Jimmy Considine. Jimmy was in the liquor business. He worked, his family was involved in one of the major liquor distributors, now since sold here in Rhode Island. And I was in my younger days and full of You know what in vinegar is, they used to say. And he would look at me, because to him I was a yuppie. Because I talked about all these exotic beers and all this kind of thing. And he'd look at me and he goes, "You yuppies are all like, when are you going to realize?" And he had this great clipped Blackstone Valley accent that I couldn't possibly do justice to. But he kind of spit out some of his words. "You yuppies. Rhode Island is a mill beer state. It's a bud state. In my world, you got 3 types of wine. You get your red, your white, and your pink. And that's how Rhode Island's going to be."
Yep.
When you look at these hallucinatory numbers that are generated by the Paw Sox in justifying this subsidy, I love your opinion on this. To me, my opinion, is that it belies the fact that Rhode Island is a blue-collar, ham and egg, working guy, that's what I am, kind of state. And the notion that you could take this beloved institution, and what's the first thing people would say right after saying the Pawtucket Red Sox? Family-friendly, $5 tickets. It could be $8 tickets, but people still think they're $5 tickets. Free parking, get you a beer. That's the words that follow inevitably right behind your definition of going to see a Paw Sox game to anybody who hasn't been to one. It's the first thing everybody talks about.
Absolutely, it fits in.
Is there, as someone who lives in Pawtucket, and I say this word with admiration, is a street activist, because that's what I'm trying to be, at the most basic level, who knows business owners on a first-name basis in Pawtucket, all right, who was raising his family in Pawtucket. Is there a market out there to support $20 Paw Sox tickets, $10 parking, as you said, $10 glasses of wine and brie? Is there a market there for that here in Rhode Island?
No, there isn't. Unless you're talking about gentrification, right? So you're going to bring in all these Bostonians who are paying too much for their apartments, and they're going to come to Pawtucket and pay half that price, which is still going to be a lot. Then you have these free spenders rolling around, and they're going to pay all this money, and you're going to gentrify the entire city and just replace them with millennials, not yuppies, but millennials.
But those people aren't here, are they?
No, and they're not going to come there because our schools are terrible,
Right.
right? They're broken. There's high crime rate. There's a lot of gun violence and violence. So I think the plan to gentrify Pawtucket, as I see it, as the mayor potentially wants to do with the train station and the Paw Sox stadium, is a terrible, terrible plan. And it's funny that you mentioned like the working class aspect of how Pawtucket is, and the amount of money that people earn and what they're willing to spend it on, and they go to a bar and it's Miller beer and stuff like that. I'm very much an international person, and I always have been, but I returned here, and now I'm a very local person involved. And I've been in bars in Pawtucket, and I've said things like, "I'll have a Shiraz, a glass of Shiraz," and they look at me like, "Who is this guy, and what is he talking about? What word is this, Shiraz? What is this?" And then I get this little bottle of, like the airplane wine that's like 5 years old. I pour it in my glass and I taste it. I'm just trying to,
same face, yeah.
Yeah, have a straight face. So I think a lot of the times I misunderstand, and people that I encounter in Pawtucket, with politics and knocking on doors and stuff like that. The things that people think about me are really, really on the extreme. Like because I've been involved with this issue and the tax issue, and the car tax issue, a lot of people think I'm a Republican, like a conservative Republican. And then other people, they think I'm an elitist. And other people, the immigrant community, thinks I'm an ICE agent because I'm white and I've got the short hair, and I'm knocking on their door, to get them to sign a petition or something like that. So it's really weird to exist in the way that I am in Pawtucket.
Yeah.
It really, really is. And explaining who I am and how I fit in and why I want to fit in there, because I was born and raised in Pawtucket, but I left for a long time. And I think that's something that I need to explain to people better as, you know, being a political person and an activist. It's really tough to explain.
We've only got a minute or two left. You and I are gonna work together on this.
Yes, we
We're
are.
gonna get all the stakeholders together. This isn't gonna go down easy. You're gonna see us at these senatorial, Mr. Conway, I just wanna say, you and I haven't had a chance to meet. We will. We'll politely discuss this. We'll agree to disagree, I'm sure. And then
He's
I
the
will,
nicest guy.
I
He is.
don't doubt that for a moment.
I gave him one of the Paw Sox patches
Okay.
that we made with a letter thanking him for some other legislation that he put in, and he wrote a letter back to me, and I thought that was fantastic. He thanked me for, you know, the first Paw Sox defeat, but now he's leading the effort to move them to apex.
We're gonna, in the beginning, I think, and I'm not gonna speak for everyone, but I'm gonna take the high road. I'm going to assume that there's a lot of people who are misinformed, yet who are willing to listen to an opposing point of view, particularly when it's buttressed and supported by, as you mentioned earlier, PhD level economists, people who have been involved with this issue on a national basis, and who are here to point out some simple truths so that we can prevent the same type of, I call it economic cycle of violence, that occurred in 38 Stadium, that is trying to occur in New Energy, that failed in Newport, and that will fail here. And so I look forward to working with you on this again. We're gonna have some fun, we're gonna have some laughs, but we're also, I'd like to close in this thought, don't mistake our kindness for weakness.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Let the games begin.
Let them begin.
You know what? Folks, you've been listening to the Coalition on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network, broadcasting live here on the mean streets of Providence, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. We've told a couple